Mr. Rinaldi, for what purpose?
Will the chairman yield for a few questions?
Chair recognizes Representative Zerwas. Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, thank you for all the work you've done on the budget. I really appreciate everything you've done. I know it's a tough task and something that we're very much appreciative of. Just a question about the foundation school program deferral. So this budget spends $2.5 billion from ESF, correct?
That's correct. Balances with 2.5 ESF funding.
2.5 ESF. And it also contains a contingency appropriation for the foundation school program in 2018-2019, deferring the FSP payment from the last month of fiscal year 19 to the first month of fiscal year 2020, correct?
That's correct. That has to be voted on.
And this is something we've done in the past as a body, correct? I think most
several
recently.
times, yes, sir.
2011 is most recent, or?
We did it in 2011 and several times prior to that, yes.
So under this budget, we'd make 23 foundation school fund payments in fiscal year 2018-19, correct?
Correct.
Is the intent to make 25 payments in fiscal year 2020-21, or to include that single payment in a supplemental when we come back?
The payment will occur, I believe, in September. That's where the extra payment will be picked up.
Okay.
So instead of paying it in August, it'll be paid in September.
So the intent is not to come back and do a supplemental for that single payment?
When we come back next session?
Yes.
No, that's a decision this body makes. It does not have to be returned immediately when we come back. It actually, the term people like to use is kick the can down the road, and that has been done. But we have always been very responsible in obviously truing that up, because we can't do it until it has been trued up.
So the two possibilities are we come back, we do a supplemental when we come back next biennium, or we include it in the next fiscal year budget and do 25 payments from the foundation school program.
Correct. So somewhere you have to pick it up.
Okay, but last time we included it in a supplemental, correct? Last time we
trued it up from ESF in 2013 with the amount that we basically turned over into the next legislative year.
Okay, so last time we did true it up in a supplemental using ESF funds. So if we did the exact same thing this time, we came back, we did a supplemental in order to pay off that foundation school fund payment, and we anticipate the BRE is correct, and we have what the controller is projecting we have in terms of revenue, then we would be spending 2.5 ESF out of this budget plus the 1.8 foundation school program payment for 4.3 out of the rainy day fund, correct?
Well, I don't know that we can make any decision on what the next legislature would do in terms of how we true that up, if we even true it up. To your point, though, when we do come back, the options available to us, do you true it up with what we are obviously hopeful of is surplus general revenue, which is how we really, met most of the supplemental needs in the 2013 session, where Medicaid was significantly shorted. And so it's not an automatic that you would have to use ESF in order to true that up. And it's not an automatic that you have to true it up at all during that subsequent session.
But we would have to make 25 foundation school fund payments in the previous session, unless you did the exact same thing and pushed forward, correct?
Correct. You can't take another deferral. You have to true it up before you can do that. And
last time we did an ESF payment in a supplemental, right?
I think we did. We did. We used the ESF for two purposes at that time. We used it for the water funding initiative that the speaker led, and then we also used it to true up the amount of the school foundation. So that would be, I'm presuming that is in the supplemental, so it could have been used in two places.
So if we don't do that and we push off the payment, we are setting a baseline for next budget that's at least $3.6 billion higher, because we'll have the payment we have to make up, and then we have an additional payment that's not included in this budget cycle, correct?
Right. And again, it's if you choose to make up that payment. That's not something that the body has to do. If fiscal circumstances are such that it's not the right time. And again, we have done that, where we have kicked the can down the road more than a couple of sessions.
Pushed it forward a couple.
Yes.
And then one other area I just wanted to address was Medicaid. We had talked about before, and I really appreciate you speaking to me offline as well about this. So
Yes.
the Medicaid removes $1 billion for federal flexibility. Is there any detail as to how to achieve those savings in the budget?
Right. There's it's meant to be written like it is. You'll see an amendment today that will give a lot more detail in terms of what we don't want to have happen with that flexibility rider, and I think that's incredibly important, and I want the body to be very tuned into that particular amendment. The details as to what we accomplish are vague, and they are really a reflection of the relationship that the governor and the commissioner have developed with the new administration in Washington. There are things that we have been denied in terms of federal funding that we really feel strong about may be on the table for us. And for instance, you and I talked about this, when we chose to do the Women's Health Program ourselves, because the feds were going to require us to use providers in that program that we didn't feel were appropriate, we basically cut 90% of the funding, federal funding, as a consequence of that. We now have a much friendlier ear in that area. That could be a $200 million play right there alone. And that is something that could be made, a decision that could be made by Secretary Price, who we know is from Georgia, is a bit friendlier to kind of the state of Texas.
Well, I guess just one more question. I guess my concern is that we're putting ourselves in a minimum $8.1 billion hole here, because we have 5.3 with the $1 billion federal flexibility if it's not met, plus the 3.6 plus the 2.5, or I'm sorry, 2.5 plus the 1.8 in foundation school program payment, plus the $1 billion in federal flexibility, plus we're setting a new baseline of $2.8 billion higher with no assurances that oil prices will recover in the near future. What's the best guarantee you can provide that we're not actually putting ourselves in an $8 billion hole?
I can't give you any guarantee of that at all. What I can say is that I think the state's economy is growing. It's growing at a clip that I think will very much serve the needs of Texans. I don't think I'm very hopeful, but I don't have any kind of a crystal ball for sure to say we don't end up in a hole that you described. I think it's unlikely, based on what the conversations that we've had with people who spend their whole life thinking about these things, and they largely exist over at the comptroller's office. But I think Representative Rinaldi, if you look at this budget, it's a very conservative budget, spends over $1 billion less than what we will spend this year. So this budget this year is going to come in at $108 billion of general revenue dedicated. We are going to vote a budget out today that's going to be $106.8 billion, not far off the mark where the Senate is, frankly. They also said there was a need for $2.5 billion somewhere. And so, we are incredibly conservative in this budget to try to get us through this 2-year period of time. I don't think we create a hole that we can't, basically come back from strong. And the other thing to remember is we're probably going to put about $800 million a year back into the ESF. And that's even after we pulled money off to support transportation. So the state of Texas is strong. We're in a little bit of a rough spot from an economic point of view, but we are doing well. And by passing this budget, I think we will do incredibly well, and we'll really set the stage for prosperity in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Rinaldi.